How you doing, guys? This video is in response to a thread on Red Square in reference to an RJ35 belt drive system. This is my 57 RJ. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the belt guard off because this one actually has the full fascia, I guess you'd call it, belt guard. So I'm going to pull that off so we can see the belt drive system in its entirety, and we'll go from there. Okay, now that I have the belt guard off, we can actually take a look at the Veri-Drive setup that we have. This belt we can just pop off for a second. That's obviously the engine belt. It comes from the engine pulley to the inside of the Veri-Drive. This belt actually happens to be I don't know if you can read it, it is a 4L-19-0. So this is a 19-inch belt. I said 20, but for whatever reason, I ended up with a 19-inch belt on this inside groove. Try not to get too much grease on the belt. This belt, which is this, I have the later model small pulley on that, because this is a 57. The belt that I'm running on this one is a 4L36. So this is a 36-inch belt. So there you go for the belt sizes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up on the tripod, and we will talk about actually setting this system up. Okay, what I've done since we last spoke is I put the tractor up on a set of jack stands just so my tires will free spin. As you can tell, the way I have this one set up is full neutral is in the rear position of the selector arm. The reason for that is I don't run a reverse disc. I don't see the need to run a reverse disc. Number one, if you've ever put these tractors in reverse, it's a completely hellish noise and you'll never do it again. Two, I like to have the rear position of the RJ35 be full neutral. I mean, this belt, there's absolutely no tension. And the reason why is if you have a little bit of wear in the selector indicator holes for the speed selector, the natural vibration of the tractor can actually vibrate this out, which is going to cause it, by the spring tension, is going to cause it to flip forward. And what that's going to do is automatically engage your tractor, and it will start marching along, possibly without you on it. Now, not necessarily a huge deal with an RJ35 because these things don't go too fast, but it's just something that I don't like. Plus, when I want to stop this tractor, I want to go to full, I know I can go right to the back. It's not going to creep on me or anything like that. So that's the reason why I don't have a reverse disc and we're all the way in the back position. Now, to set the system up, this is obviously your adjustment rod. This is your little adjuster, your adjuster pinion, I guess you'd call it. But anyways, this rod has to be nice and straight. You'll see them all bent up and underneath the pulley. It works straight. It works straight. If you do it correctly, if you got the right bar, it will work correctly. So, with that being said, make sure your adjuster rod is straight. Make sure your threads are good, because you will be taking this bar on and off various times in order to make adjustments. So in this case, what I've done is I've set to dead neutral in the back position. Theoretically, the reverse disc should be engaged, but we're not going to do that. And what I want to do is I want to kind of run the system with my hand. All right, your pulley runs counterclockwise, the Veri-Drive runs counterclockwise based on the crankshaft rotation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the lever so that way your spring creates the tension. Now I'm going to go up to the first notch. Now this belt is just about engaged. It's got some good resistance. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my arm and force it to the next hole. That's going to cause some slack because this belt wasn't spinning, thus forcing it down. So what we'll do is we'll turn our crankshaft. Boom, there it is. Now this belt's engaged. It's moved down, and we're set to the new position. I'm going to take my next one. I'm going to force it into one notch forward. This belt loosens up. This belt should be theoretically tighter, but because the crankshaft's not spinning, we have to manually crank it. Now this engine's got some ridiculous compression. So I'm going to be fighting the compression stroke a little bit until we get past it. We're tight, we're tight. I force it to the next hole. As you can tell, the belt loosens up. I spin it. As I'm spinning this and making these adjustments forward, the inside belt, or the crankshaft belt, is forced down into the Veri-Drive. That pushes the shive towards the outside. Thus, by the spinning motion, forces the belt to the outside. So basically, it's becoming a smaller diameter on the inside and a bigger diameter on the outside. I'm going to go and move right to the front position, furthest forward position, turn my crankshaft, fighting the compression stroke. There we go, you just heard the compression. So here we go. So now this is full on forward, and basically this is how I have it set up. I like the belt to be just on the inside of the Veri-Drive. I don't want it riding a little on the edge. I don't want it to ride a little proud. I want it to be just maybe, I think that's maybe like 1/8 of an inch in. The other thing too is I want to make sure that my belt on the inside is not bottoming out at the base of the Veri-Drive. It's just kind of like maybe the same amount of distance, so 1/8 of an inch from bottoming out. That way you know that you're riding on the fascia or the actual belt, not on the inside of the belt. To do this, you have to take the cotter pin out and you just got to keep playing with it. You know, you're going to move it forward, spin it, see where it falls, put it back. Basically we can go back. We're just going to spin the Veri-Drive. As you can see, I'm putting pressure down. I'm going to go to my back position. We're full neutral again. And you just kind of play with this. You got to remember, as you screw it in, the Veri-Drive will run higher than, so as you screw it in, the Veri-Drive, when it works, will be in a higher position, thus forcing this belt deeper into the pulley and this belt higher on the outside of the Veri-Drive. And you just kind of keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And at times, you may want to take it out on a ride and see how it works. Now, there's a couple things that I've learned. One, your pulleys have to be clean, devoid of any real rust and any paint. Anything that will cause friction, restriction of these belts sliding in the Veri-Drive, up and down, left, right, whatever way they want to go. That will cause belt, you know, this thing to flop around, this thing will be jerking around, that will jerk the whole tractor around, this thing will be singing with vibration. So you want to try to get that to not happen. And the way I found it is that make sure the belts are riding in the correct positions. Making sure that you have a good spring too. This spring I picked up at a hardware store. It was about the same thickness, about the same length. I'm actually running it in the lowest hole, some of them in the middle hole. I find that a weak spring will cause a lot of belt flop. So if you have an original one and it looks like it's a little bit beat up and tired, just chuck it. I mean, because if you're going to ride the thing, who cares if it's an original spring or not, just as long as it's a correct spring in the sense that, you know, it works the same distance, it gives you a good amount of pressure, so this belt's not going to flop around on you. Second thing, these belts have to break in. You can see probably on this one, you know, there's some, so you can see the belt material is worn off. You can start seeing some of the, actually you can see some of the, you know, canvas belting. To me, that's what you want to see on an RJ35. You want to make sure that the belts have honed into the pulleys, and especially the Veri-Drive. And because of the sliding motion of up and down, you know, you're going to get this wear. That's perfectly acceptable. Actually, I like when the belt, see, this belt's kind of like pliable and move, you know, it's like, it's real, not soft, it's still got tension, but you know, it's still not brand new hard. And that's another thing you want to do. You want to break in the belts. It'll start running better as the belts break in. But in a nutshell, that's how I do it. And that's how I set them up. Now, if you wanted to run your reverse disc, you're going to do the same thing, but instead of having the speed selector in the most rear position, you may want to, I'm actually going to move the camera here for a second. There we go. You may want to actually set your neutral here, or in this position. I don't know if I can, yeah, all right. Now in my case, it's not neutral because I've set neutral to the back position. And the other reason why I like to set the neutral to the back position is when you're engaging the Veri-Drive, you know, you're pushing that arm forward, you're allowing the power or the application of power over a greater span of the belts. So instead of going from here to here and jerking it and making those belts try to, you know, go out or go in really quick, this gives it more time to gingerly let the belts out and gingerly let the belts back in. And what I'm talking about is the actual, this belt being driven down into the pulley and this belt being driven up. Gives it more time, a more gradual rate. I find that makes these tractors just move real nice. You just put it in, you just start applying power, it just migrates out, migrates in a much smoother fashion. In a nutshell, that's how it is. It basically took me probably a good 2 or 3 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday, whatever it was, to get this tractor particularly dialed in. It runs mint. I mean, this was actually the tractor that Ken B bought from me, and then I bought back from him. And I know he indicated in one of the threads that he wanted it, may have it boomerang back to him. Sorry, Ken, I don't think so. But with that being said, that's how I set them up. It was kind of a quickie, I know, but you're just going to have to keep playing with it, adjusting, playing, until you get that proper, or what I consider the proper belt depth and actuation. I forgot to say one other thing. One of the things that came up about an RJ35 is that the rear hubs lock, even though you have it in neutral. And what you can do to unlock it is sometimes you can move the tractor just kind of with your hand, you know, push it back and forth, and that'll just kind of jerk the paw out of the hub, and then it will freewheel. The other thing you can do, which is what I typically do because it's just easier, is you just push down on the Veri-Drive pulley down and then just take your rear belt off. And if the hub is locked, it'll just spin the jack shaft pulley instead of trying to muscle it around and kind of, sometimes they lock, something like there. See, that one's that right there. See, it kind of locks, it doesn't unlock. But that's one thing I just forgot to say earlier, is just push down on the Veri-Drive arm or the Veri-Drive support and just pop the belt off. As you can tell, I put the belt guard and all the paraphernalia back on the 57. What I wanted to show you is not my 56 RJ, but I will anyways. It's a 1956 sheet metal frame RJ35 original iron steel steering wheel. But it was to talk about the Veri-Drive. I didn't really mention it. One thing you want to make sure with your Veri-Drive is it doesn't have a lot of in and out play. In other words, the bearings are good. The next thing is your shive. The center shive should slide back and forth fairly easy. Now, notice how the center shive kind of knocks around on this one. That is probably about as much wear you want in your Veri-Drive. What I have had to do with Veri-Drives in the past is actually press it all apart, or some of them are actually got set screws. There's a video I have in one of my priors. I'll try to find it where I describe the differences in the Veri-Drives. It's under the prototype build. But this is about as much play as you want in the center shive. You don't really want this thing to be rocking around too much. You want it to slide nice, you want it to be fairly tight. I actually completely rebuilt the Veri-Drive on that one. I actually had to remachine it on the inside and put it back together, and that one locks up perfectly. Same thing with my prototype Veri-Drive. I totally rebuilt that one. And this one will be totally rebuilt also. I think I have another Veri-Drive in here. And I do. Here it is. Here's another Veri-Drive. This one here, as you can tell, is a little crusty compared to the ones I have on my tractors, but you always got to have a backup Veri-Drive. And now this one here, yeah, see how much play is in that? That is too much play in a Veri-Drive. And as you can tell, it's actually even wobbled out a little bit. So if I was going to use this one, I would totally take it all apart and rebuild it. I probably, the key, there's a keyway in there, which usually has a Woodruff key in there, or there's a like a roll pin style. I'll try to find my description of all the Veri-Drives. I have it in one of my videos. Maybe I might even edit one of the videos and just throw it in on the end of this conversation so you can take a look at it. But this is too much play. If you got more than this, or you have something close to this, your Veri-Drive needs to be taken apart and fixed. This one here is a set screw right here. That is one style. You need to pull the set screws out. There should be one in the front and right there, but this one's a little blown out, so somebody put a set screw in the side. It's perfectly acceptable, but you need to take that out. And these things are pressed. The two ends are pressed on the center shaft, and this is obviously free floating. So you have to take the set screws out, put it in the press, and then just press them apart, and then basically remachine a keyway. If it has a Woodruff key, sometimes the Woodruff key slot inside the main bar stock is all blown out, so you have to recut a new Woodruff key slot. I've done that before, but long story longer, way too much play, needs to be fixed before you can put it on. The other thing too is you'll notice this thing's pretty rusty. All that pitting is going to create resistance. The belts aren't going to slide real nice, so this needs to be completely taken apart, blasted, and then I actually would cookie wheel this very gently just to smooth it all out. For informational purposes, I thought I'd show you some differences in RJ35 Veri-Drives. What we have here is, this one here is off the 1955. This one here is off my 1957. And I just thought it would be interesting to show you some differences in these Veri-Drives over the years. Now, this being a 1955, this one here was not press fit. They don't press fit these some years. There's actually a Woodruff key that goes into this piece, and that's what actually holds the shive, the center shive, from slopping around. It does slide on that piece. And then this, actually the back piece and the front, they're keyed in by a set screw right there, and that's what holds the Veri-Drive together and keeps the shive from moving. If you notice, there are some holes right here in the front shive, and I'll show you that in a second. Later on, what WheelHorse did was press fit the center section of the Veri-Drive into the front and back of the shives. And here's the three holes. As you can see, they're a little bit blown out, and I'll show you why in a second. And then the center shive, instead of being keyed in by a Woodruff key, they keyed it in with roll pins. Those roll pins correspond to the holes that are in the front shive, and that's what keeps it from spinning. It does slide on the roll pins, and it does slide. This actually will slide. This is not press fit, obviously. This does slide on the center shaft. The thing that's interesting is that, as you can see, this is off my 57. There was a lot of play, a lot of slop in I can show you maybe, hopefully, in these holes, because these holes are been kind of egg-shaped out. So what I've done is I made some marks. I'm going to re-drill it so this thing locks in real nice, and it'll slide, but it'll lock in real nice. There won't be a lot of play. But the thing that's interesting is if you look at the part numbers, 1849, 1850, 1849, and 1850. So really you don't know what style you're going to get until you take it actually apart. I've seen a couple of these with the set screws holding them into place, and the keyed with the Woodruff key. I've seen a couple of these style on RJ35s. Ultimately, from my experience, is this style Veri-Drive is like 56 and 57 with the roll pins. The earlier ones, 1955, this is what I see as the basic design of the Veri-Drive that they used. Now, with that being said, it's speculation. If you know anything about these tractors, every single thing was put together with what they had on hand at that particular time. As the day progressed and they were building the tractor, if this was the style Veri-Drive that they had, this is the one that went on it. But from my experiences, this style with the set screws and the keyed shive, that's what I typically see on the 55s. 56 and later, the press fit style Veri-Drive. So just a little tidbit, I guess. So and there's nothing to be worried about taking these apart. This one here, you pull the set screws out and the Veri-Drive comes apart. You put some new Torrington bearings in it, put a new Woodruff key in, because those usually are beat up pretty hard. You got a brand new Veri-Drive. With this style, typically the holes are a little bit oblonged out depending on how bad they are. Make a template, re-drill the holes for the roll pins, put some new Torrington bearings in it, press fit it back together. I just have a Dake Arbor press fit it back together. Make sure that you set the slide correct, the amount of slide travel correct, and basically you have an NOS, two NOS Veri-Drives, which are going to work absolutely perfect.